Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Dylan here, and in this video we're going to be explaining paging. Now, what is paging? Paging it's different than, calling from this phone to this phone. What you're basically doing is quickly connecting to an endpoint. So if there's an emergency or whatever, you can pick up this phone, dial a code, and then the other phone will pick it up if it's compatible. Most SIP endpoints that are being made today are compatible. However, some, like this Polycom phone and then the Cisco phone, are not compatible because they're old and they have different firmware on them that make the feature unavailable. It's only available on the SCCP firmware instead of the SIP firmware, unless you use something like use Call Manager patch for Asterisk or whatever. So that's basically paging in a nutshell. It is not intercom. Intercom is different. Intercom is dialing an internal extension to another extension. Just like basically calling somebody in the office. People confuse that with paging, and I don't know why. It's because there's naive people that are like, they call it anything. They could call stuff anything. They call it intercom. They call it loudspeaker, overhead. It's paging. It's called making a page. Now, how does this all work? What are the steps to deploy a paging system? Now, there are a few options. Actually, there's two. Like I said, you can create an intercom call group on your PBX. And this phone can dial this phone and it'll automatically answer. Or, technical difficulties. Or you could have an adapter like this Bogen UTI-1 go into this amplifier, and then from this amplifier goes to the speakers. Now, you might be wondering how I could hook this up to my phone system, or just a single line telephone. There are a few options on this unit. There is a trunk mode, station mode, or override. Now, with override, it just basically overrides everything. You could take an analog phone, hook it up, and you could pick it up and it'll override everything. Or you could use that for programming mode, which you could take a telephone, a single line analog telephone, dial a code for programming. Like, say you want to set the tones, you would dial a code and then followed by pound. It's in the manual. Manual explain everything. But anyways, then you have a trunk. Trunking is basically where you Yeah. Trunking is basically, it's the same thing as hooking up to the phone company, basically. Like old school stuff. So you would take the FXO port from your phone system. I'm just using an ATA for an example. You would take that, and then you would take the cable, and then it'll go to the trunk port. Do not set the FXO to the FXS, which is the station port. It'll cause conflict. Now, there are two types of trunks. Loop start and ground start, as shown here. I think loop start means that if there's a closed circuit, it'll trip this and you can make your announcement. Versus if there's a grounded circuit, this will trip and it'll go to, you can make your announcement. And then page port. I think page port and trunk are basically the same thing. Like, it's just audio only, and there's and if it detects audio, it'll trip. This thing could do everything. It's a great unit. It even has tones. Unfortunately, you can't have like scheduled tones like a school bell or whatever. You would have to have a separate master clock system hooked up to these terminals here. You have your common, and then your TN, whatever that stands for. NTR means night ring, so basically if you want to hear the telephone ringing overhead, then this is a good option. But you would hook up your master clock to the C and TN terminals. It's either normally open or normally closed. I forgot. That would trigger the tones. And then you have your relay contacts for different things. Like, maybe if you're using this for a bell system, or maybe you want to hook up strobes. You could program this to where if a page is initiated or a tone is played, this will activate, and you could hook up a relay to it and it'll activate. Now we're going to be moving on to the music input, the BGM. If you want background music, if you're hooking this up for a retail application, like you want music to be played over these intercom speakers, this is where you connect your devices to. So you could take this, takes RCA, it could either take mono or you could have full stereo. So if you want to connect this to a modern smartphone or another device that can be used as background music, you could have an RCA to 3.5 millimeter converter. They're pretty expensive. They're pretty cheap. You could get them, I think, at Walmart and Best Buy. I think Best Buy, either that or there's a mom and pop store near me that sells that stuff, so you could go there too. And then this is the confusing part. See this tip and ring? That's your audio outputs to this amplifier. I'm going to talk about the amplifier in a minute. So your tip is basically positive, and then your ring is negative. I think these are not polarity sensitive. Either they are or not. I am not sure. I've heard from multiple sources that it could either be either one. I don't know. And then take this Phoenix connector off. There's a plus and there's a minus. Absolutely do not connect your tip and ring to the plus and the minus. That's for self-amplified speakers. Meaning there's speakers like this, but it has its own amplifier. So you don't need to have a big old actual amplifier like this. So yeah. And then you have page only, which has the same options. Have your tip and ring, plus and minus if you just want to if you want a zone to be page only, like an office or something. So that's the UTI-1. And then this is the UPAM. It's the same thing. I modified it a little bit because I didn't have a 66 tool with me yet. It's basically the same thing. Tip and ring is where your phone system comes from. And if it's used for trunk mode, you would have to use a 24-volt power supply, which you could punch down here. If not, you could make an extension, hook up the T and R, and this thing will activate. And then the PT and the PR, those stand for page tip and page ring. And then there's a relay contact closure. So this is your output that goes to the amplifier. PT is positive, PR is negative. They just name it differently. And my mom texted me and she said that she loves me. That's nice. Shout out to Mom. Anyways, so you have other ones like these. This is a punch down type. Then you have your amplifier. This is where the exciting stuff happens. This is a Radio Shack amplifier, old school. Rest in peace to Radio Shack. There are many ways you could hook this UTI-1 up to here. Unfortunately, this amplifier does not have like a mic in or a line in, like a tel/line in like the TOA amplifiers have. So I basically have to splice a cable and hook it up to the T and R, and then have a 1/4-inch adapter go into one of these microphone slots, which is not good because the impedance is not designed for the microphone ports. So if I would have to like turn this knob slightly so there's like no distortion. The cool kids like to call it ear rape. Don't ask why. And then your other source can be music, and then you don't have to use this for music. You can use that, and then you would have a relay that shuts the music off. So, this thing is, where do this, or it also has phono connections, so I could hook it up there, but Same thing, the impedance is terrible. And then there's your ground, which you need to hook up, or else bzzz, you would hear like a 60 hertz hum or whatever. Then you have your 4 ohm, 8 ohm, 16 ohm, or 70 volt. Now, if you wanted to hook up this speaker with a bunch of other speakers that you would daisy chain in parallel, do not do this in series, it'll screw up the amplifier. And make sure the wattage is high enough for the amount of speakers you have. There's another video explaining that. And make sure there's like 10 watts of headroom, or else just for good measure. So basically on your speaker there are these taps. This is a 5 watt tap, and then this is the common lead. This is basically your positive that goes into the 70 volt slot, and then this this common or negative goes into the common slot. So remember that 5 watt cable goes into the 70 volt input, and then this goes into the common input. It's always the black. There's like there's taps. There's like taps per wire. So if you want, say if you wanted 2.5 watts, you would take the red wire with the common, and then the green is basically 1.0 watts for the 25 volt side, but this does not, it's not compatible with 25 volt output. But that's basically it. It would go through the UTI-1 or the UPAM, or I'll talk about the algo in a minute, to the input of the amplifier, either through the mic input, the line input, or the tel input. The tel and line inputs are super recommended, or else it'll sound like crap, basically. And then that goes into a chain of speakers. Same thing with hooking up fire alarms. You know, you have a NAC, and then that NAC goes to a daisy chain of notification appliances. It's the same thing. And then we'll go to the speakers. Okay. So that's basically paging in a nutshell. You would pick up a phone, dial a code. This UTI-1 will pick up and act like a telephone, but it's actually a paging interface. There's multiple ways. Like I said, you could either have a trunk for it or an extension for it, which you have to set to station. Or this UPAM here, which is a bunch of dip switches. If you want trunk mode, it says you have to switch on S1 and S2. And then that goes into the hot and cold, hot and neutral, or ground of this in the tel line, or the you know, basically line level line. And then that goes 70 volt output from this goes into the speaker. That's basically it. That's basically it. So nowadays people have what is called a VoIP system. It's voice over IP. Gone are the days of, say, my Merlin Magics, which is in the other room. So it makes these pretty much obsolete and not compatible unless you use, here's a Grandstream ATA. You would either use the FXO if you're using it for trunking, or FXS if you're using it for the station port. You would use these. You would use these ports on the ATAs to hook up to this. So basically, from your switch, this doesn't take PoE. It takes a regular power supply. So don't hook this up to a PoE switch or you'll blow it up. It will go from here, the WAN port. It uses WAN for some reason. And then that WAN, this acts as a VoIP phone or a VoIP line. And then it would convert that to analog, and then it would go through here. And then you would have to play with the settings on this one, like making sure that it's either ground start or loop start or call waiting or something. I don't know. I haven't had that problem, so I don't know how I would help you with that. So if you don't want an ATA and you have the extra money, you could get, bam. This is an Algo 8301. This is the same thing it does the same thing as this, the Bogan UTI-1 and the UPAM, except it has an Ethernet port for VoIP and SIP. Well, they're basically the same thing. SIP is just a protocol, a different protocol for VoIP, or whatever. You would take you would hook this up to a power over Ethernet switch. There's no power supply for this, so you could either use a PoE switch or an injector. And then from that, it converts it to, it acts like a regular SIP endpoint. And then your line out would go to your amplifier into the speaker. So if you have the extra money and you don't want to, have the hassle of you're just bored as hell with the legacy analog paging systems, you could buy these. The MSRP for these are like $500, I think. I got this off eBay for like less than $200. I'm pretty lucky. But yeah, contact your dealer if you want more information on this. So it does have relays just like the UTI-1, and there's an alternative for the line out. It's a mini XLR cable for some reason, but I think you could also do aux out from here as well. I think it's a setting you have to put in, but anyways, that's paging. So once again, phone, paging adapter, amplifier, and then it goes to the speakers. So, yeah, that's basically paging in a nutshell. Sorry if I didn't explain too good. That's the beauty of having autism, I guess. And I'll see you on a later date. I don't know when I'm gonna make another video. It's as long as I have an idea for something. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. This is Dylan, signing off.